Back in July, I was in the middle of a big HoI4 kick. During that time, I started playing sessions as Denmark, because I wanted to play the base game in Europe, but not as anyone too big, since I didn't want to try hard. Just, try medium. I ended up playing, I think, 6 sessions at least. At first, just trying to survive in general. I looked away. Oh god, everything's going wrong. We will hold to the last man, woman, and child in Copenhagen. But over time, I moved up my expectations. This time, let me try and not just hold the islands, let me hold Jutland too. Let's try and not lose any territory. And eventually it escalated to me taking down the Germans myself. As this was prior to the newest DLC, Arms Against Tyranny, it meant I was using the base focus tree and there wasn't too much complication. If you saw the Albania video I did a few months back, my initial sessions were like that, until it escalated to submarine navies and a decent air force as well as special forces. Why am I mentioning all of this here? Well, to reiterate, this was back in July, and after these sessions I had 2 big trips right after, Evo and CEO Otaku. Thus, it was pushed back again and again, and with the DLC's release drawing closer, I eventually decided I would release the video on its release, and I'd use the day to get it done. I woke up later in the day than expected, as it was finally my first day off in 12 days. I was going to play some Melty Blood with someone to warm up before getting to scripting and editing, when I noticed my computer wouldn't turn on. After further examining the tower, I realized I was out of power. Fuck! So, without power for most of the day, I decided I'd change gears and make the video you're watching now. A video about Denmark, but with the newest DLC. This meant I'd be going in super blind and would be figuring out how to hold with a vague recollection of games 3 months ago, and maybe some semblance of skill. With that, let's hop into the game. Denmark. To some, it doesn't exist. Unfortunately for them, here it is on my screen. It has to exist. It's on my screen. You don't understand. My screen invalidates yours. We start democratic, and following my video idea back in July, we'd stay democratic. The goal is to hold against the Germans and counterpunch. This new Denmark has the fancy power struggle government thing that Italy got in the last DLC, but instead of fascist infighting, it's whether we develop a welfare state or fund our military more. This is an interesting mechanic, but I ended up staying on the welfare side ever so slightly. Why? Well, in our focus tree, I opted to go down the economic and disarmament side of the tree. This allows me to better develop the country, so then I can later build up the military. I also thought it'd be even funnier to militarily prevail, despite being quote-unquote disarmed. The plan for the war is simple. I'm gonna put some artillery in my divisions and go down grand battle plan for the extra entrenchment, yada yada. For regions, I'll be building up the anti-air and civ factories, and lastly for forts, I'll be building level 7 forts on the border with Germany. Just these 2. Okay, we're gonna put a few sea forts on each of the mainland port tiles. I don't plan on holding Greenland or the smaller islands. I'd rather save my convoys and manpower. As war neared, my industry and army actually looks a decent bit better than my previous builds pre-DLC. I was very confident in the Arkma sweep as the war started, but someone apparently didn't get the memo, as I got a pop-up that allowed me to surrender. Stay democratic under Germany. Look, buddy. I didn't spend 3 straight years funneling all the disarmament funding into armaments to just give up. So here we go. Funny thing is, I guess now Germany is joined by puppet governments in Norway and Denmark to help them better invade, but the Danish one didn't actually take territory like Norway did, so I'm a gamer. During the initial phase of the war, the Italians and Germans attempted naval landings around my ports to no avail. They weren't punching through my defenses, and I had the divisions to keep them at bay. Or rather, drive them into the ocean. Things went mostly fine, and I was content to just vibe. Until a naval invasion suddenly took my capital. Looking at the footage now, I'm flabbergasted to realize I had no troops there. I had forgotten to move them back after a different naval invasion. This meant I had to act fast to prevent collapsing completely. I slowly retreated from the island of Sjælland, but also lost Lolland before managing to hold at Funen. This hold, along with further naval invasions, would make up the status quo for the next few years. I would also send the Navy out occasionally to raid the defenders, slowly weakening the Axis supply line and overall just being a nuisance. One benefit of losing my capital, or maybe a change in the DLC, is that the Germans still attempt to fight the Soviets around 1941, whether I hold or not, which is good. It was always kind of weird when I'd hold pre-DLC and the Soviets were just asleep at the wheel till 1945. This change didn't affect me too much initially, as I was still unable to penetrate Sjælland, but the Germans were very determined to try and take the rest of Denmark. By 1943, I finally got myself my powerful weapon to take back the capital, Marines. Since we'd be island hopping, I thought it made the most sense to grab them. With them in position, I relaunched my remaining ships to convoy raid to catch anyone trying to flee. The Soviet front actually enhanced this offensive by way of the Germans not having any planes over me, so I had green air. All that was left was to send them packing. With how successful that push went, I decided I would take some initiative. I moved the troops to the southern border and made a small incursion into Germany. After getting a small encirclement, I quickly planned and moved for Kiel, quickly establishing the northern front as an actual threat. I would crawl eastward, getting all the way to Stettin before pushing south. Berlin was in my sights, and apparently not in the Germans since the tile was open, so I yoinked it. I didn't get a newspaper though, so I was very sad. Nobody cared. Is this real? Were the internet people right? Was Denmark a figment of my imagination? It doesn't matter. I have to hold this line, and it's not the best. Typical of just about every Denmark game I played pre-DLC, this area marked a stalemate due to the lack of manpower to make many divisions. This time, however, I let the Allies into my country, meaning I was free to turn the Danish army into a task force to push into random areas. We liberated a chunk of Poland, pushed south into Silesia, liberated the Netherlands, and just as we moved south for Austria and Bavaria, the Germans capitulated, ending the war. This peace deal was really funny, since that whole debacle in Zealand resulted in me having a lot of war participation. Also, apparently Norway was annexed, so I gobbled up almost all of Norway except for one province and stole northeastern Germany. This post-war Europe is really interesting due to the smaller red curtain that exists, but Big Denmark is definitely a little bit cursed. I would end the video here, but there was something of note I'd like to end on. At the beginning of the war, the US stole Greenland, and Iceland became their puppet later. I was a little miffed by that, since how can you steal things I've already stolen from other people? So I loaded up another game after and played again, stationing troops there, and when the war started, I lost no territory. Even Bornholm. My gameplay masterstroke came with some downsides. I had spat out more planes and submarines, the casualties of which affected my ability to make more divisions. This, in tandem with the more spread out nature of my game plan, hindered my overall ability to get aggressive. The previous game's capital kerfuffle also being absent meant I had much less participation, so I couldn't annex as much as I wanted to. The Soviets also had a better game overall, so it's much more post-Europe-y. An interesting second conclusion to a country that most people don't think too much about in the war, huh? Well, that's all for me today. Thank you all for watching, and till next time.